MTG Mudsta, Commander tested, Goblin approved.
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Welcome back gang. This week is a special video as I've teamed up with Adrian from Giant Monster Games. If we've done it right, there should be a deck tech for his deck that he's playing today released on his channel in tandem with this one. This week, I am playing Krenko, keeping 2 mountains, Mogcatcher, Coat of Arms, Hordling Outburst, Illusionist Bracers, and a Fire Diamond. Adrian's friend Pat has brought his Zedruu deck, keeping Prairie Stream, Tundra, Mystic Monastery, Mystic Gate, Maze of Ith, Gift of Immortality, and Cast Out. Adrian is playing Braids, keeping 2 islands, Disperse, Dig Through Time, Rhystic Study, Pathrazer of Ulamog, and It That Betrays. Lastly, Jameson is bringing his Sen Triplets out again, keeping Master Transmuter, Head Games, Hurkul's Recall, Felwar Stone, Vault of Whispers, Inventor's Fair, and Buried Ruin. Pat wins the die roll and starts us off. Pat plays a tap Mystic Monastery and passes. Adrian plays an island and he passes to me. I play a mountain and I pass to Jameson. Jameson draws and he plays a tapped Isolated Chapel. Pat plays a Mystic Gate for his turn, passing. Adrian plays an island and passes to me. I play a mountain and am the first out of the gate, casting a Fire Diamond and passing. Jameson plays an Inventor's Fair and he casts Felwar Stone. Pat plays a Flooded Strand as a land for turn and he passes. Adrian plays an island and he casts Rhystic Study. I don't have a land for turn sadly, so I cast Hordling Outburst, gaining 3 Goblin tokens. At the end of my turn, Pat cracks his Flooded Strand, taking 1, and he goes to find Steam Vents, which comes into play tapped. Jameson plays a Vault of Whisperers and casts Celestial Dawn. He pays the 1 extra to deny Adrian the draw, and he passes. Pat plays a Tundra, and he casts Zedruu. He can't pay the 1 though, and Adrian draws from the study trigger. Adrian plays an island, and casts Quicksilver Amulet, passing turn. I play a Spine Rock Knoll as my land for turn, which comes in tapped, and I hide away one of the top 4 cards. I then cast Metallic Mimic, paying the 1 extra, and name Goblins as it comes into play. Jameson plays Buried Ruin as land for turn, and he casts Tezzeret, Artifice Master. Adrian gets to draw, and Jameson uptakes Tezzeret to make a 1/1 Thopter token. Pat casts Gift of Immortality on Zedruu, and plays a Temple of Triumph, scrying and bottoming the card. Adrian plays a tapped Myriad Landscape, and moves to his end step, discarding Scourge of the Fleets at the end of his turn to go down to 7. I draw for turn, and I move to combat. I swing everything at Tezzeret, and Jameson puts the Thopter to trade with the Metallic Mimic. Whoops. In my second main phase, I cast Mogcatcher, letting Adrian draw a card. Jameson upticks Tezzeret again, making another Thopter. He then casts a Master Transmuter, and he pays the 1 for the study trigger. Pat draws for turn, and he plays a tapped Hollowed Fountain. He then moves to combat and swings Zedruu at Adrian for 2 points of commander damage. He passes, and at the end of turn, Adrian activates a Quicksilver Amulet to pop out Kozilek, Butcher of Truths. Thankfully, before we move from the end step, Pat flashes in Cast Out to exile the Eldrazi Titan. Adrian draws for turn, and he plays an island and casts Sensei's Divining Top. He then passes to me. I draw for turn and move to combat, swinging all 3 tokens at Adrian. Before moving to blockers though, Adrian taps the Quicksilver Amulet to bring out the Pathrazer of Ulamog, and blocks 1 of my tokens. I activate the Mogcatcher, and look through my library to find a good Goblin card. I had a good idea for what I wanted, but midway through, I remember that I sadly tucked the card away under Spine Rock Knoll. I settle for Grenzo Havoc Razor and put him onto the field. 1 of my token dies, and I exile the top 2 cards of Adrian's library. I don't cast any of them, and I pass turn. Jameson gains 1 life on his upkeep for controlling 3 artifacts and his Inventor's Fair. He draws and upticks Tezzeret to make another Thopter token. Jameson then activates the Master Transmuter, bouncing the new token to swap it and Mindslaver from his hand. He then sacrifices it and decides to take Adrian's next turn. On Pat's upkeep, he pays in response to Zedruu's trigger and donates the cast out to me. He then gains 1 life and draws from the Zedruu trigger and then draws for turn. Pat then plays a Maze of Ith in his main phase as his land for turn, and he passes to Adrian. Adrian draws and gives Jameson his hand. Jameson pays 1 to cast Brainstorm, and draws 3 and then puts 2 back. Jameson then capsizes the Pathrazer back to Adrian's hand without paying for buyback, and then disperses the Quicksilver Amulet. He then taps the top to draw a card and places the top on top of the library and passes to me. I draw for turn and I move straight to combat again. I swing 2 tokens at Tezzeret and Grenzo at Adrian. Jameson blocks one of the tokens, and before moving from blockers, I activate Mog Catcher. I grab Goblin Chieftain, pumping my goblins by +1/+1 and giving them all haste. And Adrian exiles the top from his library, which I then cast in my second main phase. Adrian at least gets to draw from my casting it, and I pass my turn. Jameson gains 1 in his upkeep, and upticks Tezzeret again. He then casts a Vidalcan Archmage, who's recently shot up in price as of this recording, and Adrian draws from Jameson not paying the tax. Pat doesn't want Jameson to draw cards apparently, and he casts Disallow to counter it. Jameson wants that though, and he counters Disallow with Counterspell, since Celestial Dawn makes all of his lands plains, and he can spend white mana as though it were mana of any color. With nothing else, Jameson passes. Pat gains 1 life and draws a card from Zedruu's upkeep trigger before drawing for turn. Pat plays a mountain as his land for turn, and he casts an Izzet Signet, allowing Adrian to draw. Pat then casts an Alhamrat's Archive, passing to Adrian. Adrian plays an island, and is faced with the daunting feat of having to rebuild what took him several turns to get. He cracks a Myriad Landscape to find 2 islands, and he recasts Quicksilver Amulet before passing to me. I draw for my turn, and I activate the top, drawing a card and putting the top on top of Adrian's library. I play a mountain, and I move to combat. 2 tokens and the Chieftain go to Tezzeret, while Grenzo once again finds his way to Adrian. With no blockers declared, I activate the Mog Catcher to go and find Goblin Matron, putting her onto the field. The Matron trigger allows me to go find another goblin, and I put Skirk Prospector to my hand. Adrian takes another 3 and exiles his Sensei's Divining Top, while Tezzeret meets his maker and heads to the bin. I then recast the Sensei's Divining Top, and discard down to 7 before passing. Jameson gains 1 in his upkeep again from Inventor's Fair, and he casts Head Game, paying the 1 extra for Ristic Study, and he targets Adrian. Adrian puts the cards from his hand onto his library, and then Jameson goes and finds him a new hand. Pat's Zedruu trigger happens and gets doubled thanks to the archive, giving him 2 life and drawing 2 cards before drawing for his turn. He plays a Temple of the False God and casts Thought Lash in his main phase, not paying the 1. Pat, wasting no time, then pays 3 and donates the Thought Lash to Adrian. He then passes. Adrian exiles a card to the cumulative upkeep cost of Thought Lash, and we see Teferi get exiled. Adrian then draws for turn, and he plays an island in his main phase, and he then drops Ixodron, which kind of messes up my board more than a little. We do realize at least it doesn't hit tokens, so that's something. Adrian then casts a Soul Ring, and he passes turn. I draw for turn, playing a mountain in my main phase. I then pay 6 including the Ristic Study tax to cast Siege Gang Commander, gaining 3 more Goblin tokens. Moving to combat, I swing my 4 face-down creatures at Adrian, who blocks one of them with Ixodron, who just so happens to kill Grenzo. He still takes 6, and I pass to Jameson. Jameson gains 1 life on his upkeep, and he plays an Urza's Power Plant as his land for turn. He casts a Sen Triplets, and then passes to Pat. Pat sadly only gets to simply draw for his turn, as Zedruu is feeling kind of a bit shy and hiding face down. He plays a Care Keep as his land for turn, and Jameson helps Adrian out with a Dive of Shame. Pat then plays the Locust God, paying the 1 extra and passes. At the end of turn, Adrian casts Cryptic Command, choosing the modes of bouncing Thought Lash back to Pat's hand, and drawing a card. Adrian casts a Thran Dynamo, and I'm kind of jealous of all the mana he has. He then activates the Quicksilver Amulet with the Dynamo and the Soul Ring, and still has 1 floating colorless left. He puts out the Pathrazor, and then Adrian casts Lightning Greaves. Pat responds to the spell in the stack by activating the Locust God's ability, but gets to draw 2 and only has to discard 1 thanks to the archive, which is pretty neato. He also gains 2 insect tokens, which isn't bad. Adrian then equips the Greaves onto the Eldrazi, and he swings the Pathrazor at Jameson and Ixodron at me. Jameson sacrifices his creatures to the Annihilator trigger, and then takes 9. In his second main phase, Adrian casts Abduction on the Locust God to steal him away from Pat. In my main phase, I pay 6 for Coat of Arms, denying Adrian the draw, but more importantly, denying him the ability to gain an insect token as a blocker. Moving to combat, I swing everything at Adrian. He blocks 1 of my Goblin tokens with the Locust God, which dies and goes to Pat's graveyard, but Adrian then still dies to the overwhelming horde of goblins. With nothing else, I pass, and at the end of turn, Pat returns the Locust God to his hand. Jameson gains 1 life on his upkeep, and he picks me with the Sen Triplets trigger. He then casts my Cheering Fanatic, and then my Skirk Prospector, and then Goblin Bombardment, and finally Krenko's Command, gaining 2 more goblins. He then sacrifices the 2 tokens to the Prospector to make 2 red, and he casts my Illusionist Bracers, and suddenly my lovely hand of cards is now just Squee the Immortal. Having robbed me of some pretty sweet cards, Jameson then passes to Pat. Pat plays a Plains as a land for turn, and he recasts the Locust God. He then passes to me. I draw for turn, casting the card I drew, Bogart Shenanigans. I swing everything at Jameson, who seems the most likely to board wipe me next turn. He blocks 2 tokens and the Siege Gang Commander, and we move to damage with one of the tokens blocked living. He then takes 27 damage from what wasn't blocked, and then 2 from the Bogart Shenanigans as 2 of my goblins died. I then pay 1 to activate the Spine Rock Knoll, revealing Goblin Trashmaster, and I pass turn. At the end of turn, Pat activates the Locust God, and drawing 2 cards, and discards an Acroan Horse. Jameson gains 1 in his upkeep from the fair, and he plays Cascading Cataracts as his land for turn. He then vindicates to destroy my coat of arms, and casts a Hercule's Recall to bounce Pat's Archive. Pat draws for turn, gaining another insect token. He moves to combat, taking Jameson out with his insects and the Locust God. In his second main phase, Pat casts Illusions of Grandeur, gaining 20 life, and follows up with an Aetherflux Reservoir, then paying 50 life to deal 50 damage to me and close out the game. Game review time. So I'll be the first to admit, I pretty much tunnel visioned on Adrian because I was terrified of him casting Braids and then starting to cheat out Eldrazi for free. He'd done so in the game before, and it was kind of terrifying, so he had to go, especially when he played Ixodron and messed up my entire board. Unfortunately, as a result, Adrian didn't get to really do anything, plus, coupled with the fact that Jameson really messed him up by using Mindslaver and Head Games to mess with his hand and his turn, he didn't really get to do very much before dying. Speaking of Jameson, his deck unfortunately didn't perform very well, although I did like the interaction with Celestial Dawn, allowing him to cast pretty much whatever he wanted. I know it's a staple for Sen Triplets, as it allows him to cast whatever he wants from anyone's hand, and it used to be a staple for Zedruu before they changed the fact that people were allowed to generate mana outside of their commander's colors. It's always cool to see another take on a commander you play, and Pat's Zedruu deck was no different. I really enjoyed how the game ended, casting Illusions of Grandeur and using the gain life to pay for Aetherflux Reservoir and take me out of the game, as opposed to the typical fashion that most Zedruu players use it for, which is to donate away and force people to take 20 damage. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta, and lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.